So for the first time in 69 years, the Fijians get themselves a victory over the Australians, and it's on the biggest stage in a Rugby World Cup match, 22 points to 15 in favour of the Flying Fijians, and this was a must-win game for Fiji. They had to fire back after that narrow loss to Wales, in which they did receive the 2 bonus points, and the reason I mentioned that is because bonus points in this group of Pool C may become more and more crucial as we get towards the final matches. But the Fijians, they showed a lot of heart throughout this fixture. The Australians, ill-disciplined, giving away 18 penalties throughout the match. But in this review, we will be looking through at the key players for the two sides, a few of the other stats, and overall what we thought of the game. But starting with the Fijians, they were able to score themselves 1 try throughout this game. It was the try of Joshua Tuisova, and it was in the second half of a mistake from Australia. Kuruvuli kicked it in behind, and he, for one, had an absolutely fantastic game. So a massive shout out to that man. But the kick was in behind Carter Gordon and Mark Nawaqanitawase. There was a miscommunication, which then allowed Tuisova to clean up the ball, run it to the try line, and score the Fijians' only try of the match. For the Australians, they were able to score themselves 2 tries, the first of which scored by Mark Nawaqanitawase early on in the fixture, and then the second try for the Australians, it was scored by Suliasi Vunivalu, a man who made his way off the bench, seemed to have a decent impact for the Australians throughout this game. But for Fiji, from the get-go, they were looking to be physical throughout this encounter. We saw a few of the massive shots that were coming in. Australia, they did pretty decently being able to match that physicality throughout the first 30 or so minutes. But somewhere that the Fijians did struggle was actually in their lineouts, only winning 7 from 11. That was the advantage that the Australians needed to make the most of, but just weren't quite able to. For Fiji, they made 401 running metres throughout this game compared to the Australian 384. Defenders beaten relatively even between these two sides. 23 beaten by Fiji and 20 beaten by the Australians, and both sides opting to go for those offloads quite often. 6 for the Fijians and 7 for the Australians. But I mentioned it earlier on, that penalty count. 18 penalties against the Australians, only the 7 against Fiji, and that was where the real difference was. The jackling of Fiji in this game was absolutely immense. Lavani Botia getting over the ball multiple times. Te Ehuaru Thirikadavita also getting a couple crucial turnovers, and then Lakema Tangivalu as well as Mata bringing that physicality in the loose forward trio. For the Australians, we didn't really get to see their backline enough, but that was huge credit to the Fijians for what they were able to do early on, which was shut down Carter Gordon, knock the confidence of the youngster, and mean that that backline for Aussie became almost non-existent at times throughout this exciting game. But one of the key players for Fiji, I mentioned him a bit earlier on, Simeone Kuruvuli. He managed to have 100% kicking accuracy, which was absolutely crucial for Fiji. As we knew in this game, every point would be important, but not just that. In the way that he was playing in the starting lineup, I was very surprised not to see him with man of the match, but instead that went to Tuisova, who was able to break through quite a few tackles, scored the try as well, and Lavani Botia also another honourable mention, making 14 tackles. I believe he turned the ball over 3 times in the breakdown for the Fijians, and it was just that little bit more possession near the end of the game that helped Fiji, in a game that in the 20 minutes prior, that Australia were having a lot more of the ball. But possession for the whole game, 51% for the Fijians, just narrowly edging it in their favour. But one thing is for sure, the Fijians are back, ready to go for their next game in the Rugby World Cup. They do have to wait a week because they have got the bye for this next weekend, and then they are facing Georgia as well as Portugal over the next 2 coming weeks. And the big thing for Fiji is to make sure that they win those games, because if they don't and they lose one of those 2 contests, more than likely Wales and Australia will be the 2 sides making their way through to the next stage of the Rugby World Cup. Whereas if Fiji can continue winning from here with those 2 points that they managed to get in the first game up against Wales, that might just be enough to put them through to the quarterfinals. But do let me know, ladies and gentlemen, what you thought of the match in the comments down below. It was an absolutely incredible game to call on the channel. We are covering every game of the Rugby World Cup as well from here on out. So be sure, if you haven't already, to hit that subscribe button, and I will see you all for the next one.